Welcome to the latest edition of our Artist in Conversation series. My name is Graham Mackenzie, and I'm the Artistic Director of Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival. I'm joined today by a Lithuanian artist and this year's composer in residence at HCMF, in fact, Lina Lapelytė. Lapelytė's performance-based practice is rooted in music. It flirts with pop culture, gender stereotypes, and nostalgia. Her works engage trained and untrained performers, often in the art of singing, which takes the form of a collective and effective event that questions vulnerability and silencing. Lapelytė had major success with her beach opera, Sun and Sea, which was the recipient of the Golden Lion at the 58th Venice Biennale in 2019. I'm also joined by Bristol-based artist Cathy Hinde. Hinde is an audiovisual artist inspired by behaviours and phenomena found in nature and the everyday, expressed through audiovisual installations and performances that combine sound, sculpture, image and light. Hinde's work represents a cross between kinetic sound sculptures and newly invented instruments. And she frequently works in collaboration with other practitioners and scientists, and often involves the audience in the creative process. Welcome to you both, and my thanks to everyone for listening. Enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, Lina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah. I actually really want to know which forest you're in. If you're in a forest. Are you in a forest?
I am in a kind of forest. Yeah, it's in Lithuania
Oh,
near yeah. So this is like the summer place for me. Usually I try to escape in the summer. Uh and it's been like that for like I don't know, the last 14 years that I've been spending summers here, but sometimes I fail to do it. And this summer is also it's just like a third day since I arrived, and I feel the summer is already ending. So it's not really like a time off, but it's a time in nature, which is nice. It's very quiet here, which I really love about this place.
I've got a really big love for Lithuania, by the way.
How comes?
Um, well, I've been a few times, but my grandmother emigrated from they left Klaipėda in 1903, my great grandmother, and they migrated to Wigan in northwest England. And
Ah,
and I started to look at this. I sort of found out that was the route they took. And I also, at the time, I was looking at bird migration, and I saw that it's the Great Baltic Flyway. And so I wanted to kind of make this like kind of connection between the migration of birds and the migration of my family and members of my family I've never met. So I kind of took myself off to Klaipėda, and I went along the Curonian Spit trying to film migrating birds in like October in I don't know 2008 or 9 or something. And yeah, it's really incredible experience. And I also went back around to Vente on the other side of the lagoon and
this
kind
is
of
where we are.
explored. Sorry?
This is where we are,
No
near Vente.
way. You're
Yeah.
in Vente.
Like
Yeah.
7 kilometers away from there.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh, so I that's brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was well, the funny thing was is I was looking at maps to try and think about where would be a good place to film migrating birds.
Mm.
I thought Vente would be the best place. And so I got a bus to let's see if I can remember beginning with a place beginning with S, a town.
Shuluta.
Yeah, I think so. And then they said, "Oh, I said I want to go to Vente," and they said, "Oh, we don't go to." I mean, this is all in like sign language and pointing at maps.
Yes,
They were
yes.
like, "Oh, we don't. The bus doesn't go there at this time of year." And so I persuaded them to take. I was with my boyfriend Matthew. I persuaded them to take us to Vente and drop us off. So they did, and there we were, and I'd managed to book somewhere to stay. But then I totally forgot about the fact that the bus doesn't go there, so we couldn't get back. So we spent this time in Vente, I think like 3 days. And also there was nowhere to get food at that time of year, so it was a real adventure. But
Oh my
really
God.
beautiful
Yeah.
and incredible. And we're going out at like 4 o'clock in the morning to sort of try and see the sort of swans and geese and migrating birds over the lagoon. It was just really incredible.
Yeah, it's a very special place, I would say. It's amazing that you've been here. It's really so when was it in 2009, you say? 2008.
I think I can't remember whether it was 2008 or 2009,
Okay.
somewhere around them.
Yeah, fantastic. And you, but you're because I I looked at like some of your works and I was particularly interested in this like piece with birds that you did for the flocking birds.
Oh, you mean
So is this related to,
the recent piece I did last year?
yeah.
Ah, I mean, it kind of is related a little bit because I've been doing pieces around birds and bird migration and this kind of fascination for like so many years. Um, so yeah, it's kind of related. But the piece I made in relation to this journey from Klaipeda to Wigan, I used a film of birds projected onto a piano, and where the birds move, they play the piano strings because my grandmother worked in a piano shop in Wigan and sold pianos. So there was, it was this kind of like, and I had this broken piano that someone gave to me, just the soundboard, and I was just trying to figure out what to do with it. So it all kind of like pieced together. But I went back to Lithuania a few times and to Vilnius, to Kaunas, and I also went off on a little holiday at the recommendation of some Lithuanian friends, and I stayed in a tree house by a lake, and it was just I just love the place in the summer, just the amount of forest and green.
Mm.
So what are you doing in Vente?
So it's just like actually like so since 2009 we had an access to this countryside place where we can just stay in the summers. So just really just being surrounded by nature and
Mm.
um mushroom picking, berry picking,
Mm.
swimming in the pond
Oh wow.
and trying to work at the same time because as I said, like the summer is not very holiday like summer. So it's a lot. I have a lot of things lined up in autumn,
Hmm.
but still somehow even if it's a working mode, but when you are in this very calm location, it it still somehow feels, I mean, not necessarily the most efficient way of working.
Well, so what are you working on then for the autumn?
But so yeah, so it's this Huddersfield's residency coming up where I'm doing 5 works, which is a lot. I mean, it's the pieces that I've done before, but the closest one that's coming up, it's a work in Paris where I also work with sounds of animals, so not just birds,
Ooh.
but animals of all kinds and children producing them.
Oh
So,
wow.
so it's a very complicated piece in terms of logistics. But and everyone is on holiday now in any case. So
So will you
so
work with children from Huddersfield in Huddersfield as well?
oh no, this is no, this piece
Oh,
we're not doing in Huddersfield.
oh
The
yeah.
work I'm mentioning for the children is with the local kids from Paris in Paris. So yeah.
So did you work
And how
with
about you? Because you
oh,
say again.
I said did you work with the children to like imitate the animal sounds, or did you kind of like collaborate and workshop that? How did that work?
Yeah, this is what we did. Oh my God, I have a little dog here barking on me. So yeah, it was a period of workshopping the sounds with kids, and but I never wanted them to kind of really be just performers. It was also a process of getting to know them and
Yeah.
getting to know what they like. So it's a very kind of process-based work, and we did workshop that. So but it's not just like a sound piece, it's also a choreography, and it's a spatial, like site-specific work. So there are a lot of elements that come together, and the kids are very different ages, like from 5 to 16. So
Oh.
so there is like, the inner relationship within them that's like peculiar and interesting, and I'm also interested in this like element of care,
Mm.
and how they can also practice that within the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to sort of create situations where you can work alongside and with people from all kind of different backgrounds and ages, but also have them work with each other and kind of share experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that's kind of that that that's what I like, and you kind of lose the control of the outcome in certain in some ways, but I think that kind of relationship is still like, at least in my work, is a key element. Do you do that too in your work?
Yeah, I think I was looking at some of your pieces too, and I really like the way you work with something that you're not fully controlling in the sense of when you spoke about working with singers that were not necessarily sing it wasn't about singing in tune. It was about finding your voice and things like that. I kind of like also uh quite enjoy creating installations or pieces or situations where there's an element of something that I don't know what's going to happen. So it might be a kind of instrument that I've made or an installation I'm going to perform with, where I've created a behavior or something that kind of sets in motion or makes the conditions for something to happen, but I don't know how it's going to play out. And then you have to kind of like really have a conversation or like an improvisation with whatever that is. And again, thinking about
Yeah.
working the piece that you mentioned earlier, Flock, that was a piece made for children. And so again, it was like workshopping ideas and bringing kind of provocations and sort of questions and playful ways of working with them into the space, and then sort of like finding out how they respond and learning from that and sort of you know um helping to shape the piece that I ended up making. So it's kind of like a conversation. uh,
How
um
how did you how did you arrive into like working in this method? Like I mean, what's your like formal training, and how did you arrive to where you are now?
um well, I always wanted to be an artist really, and I was always making things and drawing and painting and just like really love making stuff like hands-on, like building things. And then I was also, I mean, I studied piano. I mean, I learned piano and I was always into music. Um, and I was just sort of always, I kind of got this fascination about combining music and art from, I don't know kind
Mm.
of where that came from, but I started looking at, in fact, when I was a teenager, my piano teacher had studied at Bretton Hall, and she did inter arts, and she's a composer, and she did all these like collaborations with poets and painters. So I think it's kind of like put some ideas in my head. And so I studied a combined degree of art and music. But then the music part of that was kind of classical piano and composition. And then the art side was, I guess, installation and like fine art. But it's all been really organic how I've got to where I am, I think. So yeah, it's a bit of a kind of wiggly journey, I suppose. But I think that combination of visual and sonic, or that interdisciplinary thing, has always been something I've been really passionate about. And sort of it not wanting to slot into a particular medium or yeah. So that sort of crossing over, and also that openness of wanting to work in different locations with different people, different situations. Like I'm always keen to sort of try and make situations where I end up, I don't know, working outside or up a tree, or like, with different groups of people. Because it's sort of, I just find it really inspiring, and that's where I want to be and what I want to be doing. So sort of trying to shape situations where that's how it plays out.
And so do you do a lot of things with your hands, like looking at your background?
Yeah, I know.
Like,
It's like crazy.
It's a proper like maker studio. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I have really a lot of stuff. I kind of like, I'm a bit of a magpie. I kind of gather things. And I really like repurposing stuff that I find. I mean, obviously I'm kind of like I've got materials that I use and make stuff from scratch as well. But yeah, I kind of like, I've always liked making things. And so this is like a culmination of, I don't know, 20 years worth of making stuff and gathering things. And yes, yeah, I really enjoy that. I'm really passionate about it.
So this is the studio that you have for the last, for like, you've been always having the studio as like a space to put
well, I
things
think
on.
no, I have moved quite a few times. This is a shared, it's a shared space actually. There's other people in different the room that they're not in at the moment.
Yeah.
But
no, because it's interesting because I never had a studio in my life, so I would always be working in these very mobile conditions, or unless I would like work in the location, otherwise I would just be just me and my laptop and keyboard and some instruments, but everything like super mobile. And
oh, that sounds creepy.
But this year I finally like moved into a studio, and I realized how my understanding of what I can do changes, Suddenly I'm like, okay, so I can test things out, and I can also think of building something. It's such a different way of being, I guess.
Yeah. So you're a maker as well. Oh, I mean, what's your background in coming into? Because I noticed that you studied. You also did you do sculpture at art college as well as music?
Yeah, well, I studied classical violin as a like to start with, so I I have a degree in classical violin and then another one in sound arts. And then I went to study sculpture for my MA, but I never really produced any object. I think I have this like in my mind, I have this like very immaterial thinking, like really being a musician. And I think I was always, even though I'm very fascinated about like architecture and objects, I would never produce them. Up until like, I don't know, like 5 years ago, when I started to kind of really think in more expanded ways. But when I was studying sculpture, I never did anything else than sound or music or performance. So yeah, so I mean the objects would be people in my case. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw on your Instagram that you've been working with this stone sort of sculptural
Yeah.
mirror. That looks amazing. That looks amazing.
Yeah. This is this is the piece I was really no one would dare to produce because it's a kind of a very complicated piece in terms of getting it done and finding an agreement because the stone, so it's called copperlick, and copperlick because the name. Can you hear me, or is the wind blowing into my microphone?
It's okay. You cut out for a little bit, but it kind of caught up with itself.
Okay. So yeah, so because initially the project is on getting the churches, the bells of the churches to ring together in the city because they're kind of all having their separate agendas. And I had a vision that it would be amazing that there is a piece that would connect them all together, but then also that the bells would not be the main element of the work, but they would just work as an accompaniment for a human voice. So to kind of to put together this very fragile aspect of human being and this very strong and loud thing as a bell sound. So the thing that is ringing the bell is called the tongue, and we thought,
oh yeah,
so that's why the lick.
Oh yeah,
the copper lick. And then we wanted, and I wanted like something that would be almost like a stage in a public place that would sort of signify the location where you're supposed to listen to this connection of the voices and of the church bells. So it's kind of situated. So the stone sculpture is situated in the center between the 7 churches that were ringing every week. So the sort of performance was happening every week for 3 months, where the singers would come and the bells would ring the particular tones and at that particular time, and they would do it together. So that was yeah, and that was happening in Munich, and it was the public artwork commission from the city municipality there.
And will that stay there, that stone piece, so that it could be like a listening point for future?
Yeah, I mean the city itself and their public art department, they're constantly rethinking the meaning of public sculpture, and I think they're kind of one of the aims is also not to put something like as a permanent work. So now it's gonna so the stone is staying till the end of September, and then after that I think it's gonna yeah, I guess to just keep the city changing. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I went. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, no, I went on a trip to Dungeness a few years ago to see the sound mirrors and to stand in the sound mirrors there that were, do you know them? Have you been there?
Yes, I haven't been there, but the sound mirrors, yeah, I do know them.
Yeah, they're really enormous. Really fascinating. I'm really interested in this kind of how sound behaves in space. And yeah, that's been kind of quite an inspiration for me as well, how acoustic space will affect sound and and the physicality of sound.
Yeah. Yeah, but then I don't know, I guess in the case of the work I did in Munich, it's also there are so many moments that are somehow again like on cannot be controlled, and they're so based on the chance of like
Yeah.
the direction of wind
Yeah.
or the the floods in the, like the amount of rain that came
Yeah.
down and then filled the river with. So
It's kind
yeah,
of
so
also,
mm,
I guess, fascinating when, if you think about how people might experience the piece, they could be anywhere in the city, and the way they're moving through, the way the church bells are kind of sounding from different locations is also, it's really fascinating to see that at one point it kind of like comes together as you imagine in this
yes,
stone. There's all these other possibilities of experiences.
yes, exactly. It's like it's really like this hyper connection perhaps in my mind, and it's interesting to also to understand how that um also something that's very religious, like if you think of bell
Mm.
sounds, I think they have like some particular
Yeah.
functions and meanings, and I was actually quite amazed that we were able to use that very loud feature for something that's
Mm.
non-religious at all, and and to yeah to think of the bells as an instrument. And
Mhm.
but you work a lot in the public space too, right?
Yeah, yeah. You just, yeah. I do try and find situations where I can work outside and in public space, and I think it's always really interesting to think about what how that would be experienced in different spaces. So you kind of just reminded me of a piece that I made. Not that it's a similar piece, but I made a piece in the Bristol Harbour a few years ago, and I'd spent all this time kind of like following one of the hidden rivers in Bristol, and it was through lockdown, kind of recording it and walking it, and as we kind of came out of lockdown, I took people on listening walks to listen together to this river as it kind of comes into the city. It kind of goes underground for some time, and then it comes out into the harbour, and inviting different people on the walks with me. So I kind of went through this process of gathering sounds from all these kind of watery locations. And then there's a point in Bristol where the two rivers, the River Frome and the River Avon, they meet. And originally, well, the River Avon's really tidal. It's like got a massive tidal range. So the tidal bit of the river, if you pay attention, I mean, it's really obvious it's changing, but you don't always notice. But it changes like about 10 meters in
Yeah.
height twice a day. But the harbour, which is in the main city centre, has been built so it's always the same level. So unless you go and sort of experience this tidal bit of the river, you don't necessarily notice that Bristol's got this huge tide. Um, so then I did
Mm.
a kind of final performance at a point in the harbour, really close to where the rivers rejoin, because one of the rivers is underground and it comes out of a little pipe into the
Mhm.
tidal river, which is also rerouted. So they're both kind of not on in their original course. And this point where they meet, like completely hidden.
Mm.
So I did this piece very close to that location. And I put the musicians on. So I made a kind of surround sound piece using these like sculptural speakers attached to railings all around the harbour. And in my mind,
Mm.
I'm thinking, oh, this is quite a contained space. and the audience can be all around. People might be like wandering past and they might stop and, have a listen. And then I did this 30-minute performance with musicians on canoes, trumpet players and trombones, and a tuba player, and they were
Oh, wow.
on boats. Well, some of them were on boats that were like being rowed, some were on a pontoon, and then others were on this kind of more stationary ship. But it was all in this one kind of basin of water. And then people could, just come across it and be in different locations. But I hadn't really quite realized how loud they had to play to be heard in this space, because I guess it was kind of bigger than I thought in terms of how the sound traveled. But it was also, again, the day we performed it, it was really windy. So everything kind of shifted and changed, and it was really, I really, really enjoyed it, because I could never have known how that was going to be. And it was all a kind of an imagination of bringing together all these different parts. All the kind of music parts were semi-improvised, but based on some of the tones of the resonant frequencies of the bridges and the culverts, and all of these kind of discoveries from listening to the water. But yeah, it was just like this kind of moment happened, and it would just never be able to be repeated, because of all of those different factors, like the weather and the wind and where people were. And even though the boats that were rowing had a kind of guide about where to go and how to cross over, it was just so much down to chance, and so much kind of down to how everyone like worked together and listened to each other, and it was just a really special kind of moment because of where it was as well, where these two rivers like reconnect. So yeah, I really love it when a location becomes really massively sort of part of it and connected, a bit like your kind of, the bells of a city. It's like it's so integrally part of where all those bells are, and where the people listening are. So
Yeah, I guess it's this like chance element, I guess, that you have to be open to, or like be ready for that to happen, that probably take it as an advantage, because or
yeah.
predict, or like something like wind, you cannot order that.
No. It's like, I think it's like wanting to have that flexibility within how the piece is put together. And I think that's one of the things I also quite enjoy, trying to work out, like how to kind of shape something or make a framework that has got enough about it to make something actually happen, but also enough sort of flexibility and stretch for things to emerge that you would never have expected, that are, become part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And what are you working on now? What is your
Um,
current?
well, quite a few different things, but I've started quite a long project with a nature reserve in the east of England, in a really beautiful location. It's a place called Wicken Fen, and the Fenlands are at the east of England. Do you know the Fens? Have you been up to East Anglia?
Not
It's
this part.
really, really flat. Um, and it
Mm,
used to be all kind of swampy and full of water and peatland, and it was in the sort of 19th century, it was drained for agriculture, and there's this particular nature reserve where they've got a whole kind of area of the fen that was never drained, and it's really full of peat. It's really biodiverse, and they're celebrating the 125th year anniversary of being a nature reserve. So I'm doing a project with them all around, kind of listening to the different voices that are present within this location, because it's I mean, there's loads of different birds,
voices.
insects, and dragonflies, and
Okay.
but
Okay.
also like the voice of the wind, or even some of the yeah, so I've been devising these listening walks to take people on. And then we're sort of going to be, I've made one installation this summer, which is a series of sort of sound dome. They're called sound domes. Oh, I know, I've called them sound pools. So they're these kind of domes that hang over the boardwalk, and they play some of the underwater soundscapes, some of the kind of hidden sound worlds of the fens from this particular fen. Just kind of inviting people to tune into these sounds you wouldn't normally hear. But I was also kind of like thinking the listening walks work really well because I take people out for an hour and we use a parabolic microphone and some hydrophones and contact mics and just sort of reveal some hidden sounds and really enhance people's senses for listening out for things and other species.
So would you have like loudspeakers to then amplify the?
Oh, I'm using those sort of wireless
Oh, okay.
headphones. Yeah, so
Yeah.
everyone's kind of, and then I'm kind of mixing between different microphones. And that people have responded really well to that because you can kind of really tune into like specific, like when it was May, there's a bird called the grasshopper warbler, and it just sounds like a grasshopper, and it's totally mind-blowing that it's actually a bird. And with a parabolic microphone, you can kind of
Wow.
just, you can't, I've never seen one, but you can just wait, you can kind of like scan across all the reed beds, and then suddenly you'll hear this and it would be like, wow, what's that?
Wow.
And you could never really have probably tuned into it without this extra listening tool. So people kind of get really fascinated by all the different things that are there that you can't see or you might not necessarily notice. So yeah, I've been doing these listening walks, and also I trained up some of the staff and volunteers that work there, and we've got a whole load of this listening walk equipment. So they're just going to keep doing listening walks as part of
Amazing.
their general everyday running. Well, probably not every day, but they're going to start continuing that because people kind of go bird watching and they're there with their binoculars and looking for birds. But so we're trying to sort of encourage people to kind of really tune into listening to the soundscape. Yeah, and then I'm sort of going to be working
Yeah.
this year with them on workshops, probably some instrument making that's inspired by some of these sounds and listening experiences. And then yeah, these sound domes as an installation. And it was really interesting kind of thinking about how I might make an installation in this place because it's on the one hand there are a lot to listen to, but in general it's really quiet and it's really peaceful and calm. And I was like, oh, how can I make a sound installation in this place? Because it needs to be really sympathetic to the actual experience of being there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I discovered these like parabolic speakers. Actually, Claudia has used them in one of her installations before, and I'm asking her advice about that. So and they just
So they're ready-made, right? You're not producing them,
yeah,
or
yeah. So
okay, yeah.
well, I am actually going to make my own now that I've got some.
That's nice. Cool.
But I clad them in a kind of wooden frame so that they look a bit more in keeping with the natural. They kind of look like big seed pods.
Yeah.
But it means that when you walk underneath them on the boardwalk, you kind of go into this really focused sonic listening space, and you can listen to all the detail of the underwater species. And then as you walk out again, it disappears. So you don't get this kind of sound spill into the rest of the space because so yeah, that's worked really well, and people have been really curious about the sounds, but also find it really calming to sort of listen to this underwater soundscape. So I'm
Yeah.
working on more things for this project, and I don't know, see where it goes. I've just sort of finished that installation, and I'm going back to think about I'm going to be doing more things next summer.
Nice. I was, yeah, when you were talking about like people doing the bird watching, but actually not knowing how nature sounds, I was also quite amazed when working with kids for this Paris project that that a lot of them know the names of different animals, but then when you ask them how they sound, no one has an idea. And that was really interesting, like learning path for a lot of us, also for myself. Like sometimes you just somehow don't question how they sound, as
Yeah.
if just knowing how they look gives the full picture, but actually it's not. Because when you're in the nature, and then you usually hear first, or
Yeah.
you just hear and you never see, and then you don't know what you hear
Yeah.
unless you learn how to listen.
Yeah, well, this is also like a thing that's been coming into my head because the underwater sounds at Wick and Fen that are really amazing. There's like loads of
Mm,
different, and they're kind of, some of them sound really electronic and rhythmic, and
exactly.
and it's just like I've no idea what's making that sound. I mean, I've got inklings about what might be, because I do also really quite like to chat to, ecologists and other people researching bioacoustics to sort of find out about what kind of research they're doing. And
Mm,
but basically, I don't know what's making the sound. And it's also quite interesting on these listening walks in a nature reserve, where you probably do get quite a high proportion of bird watchers that want to sort of spot specific and sort of have a list of birds to see that they're checking off that they've seen. Um,
mm,
some people really, really want to know what's making the sound underwater, and kind of look a bit put out when I say I don't know what it is. Um, not many. It's just like this kind of way of thinking, or we're just, just going through this process of listening and being curious. And actually, the fact that there's all this sound that we hadn't expected is is really amazing, and kind of it sort of sparks your curiosity, but also about what it might be, but also there is loads of stuff in there making sounds. And you look at the surface. I mean, there were some amazing sounds coming out of this really shallow ditch that had some water in it. And I was thinking, oh, I don't know if there's going to be anything in
yeah.
here. Put the hydrophone in, and it was like fizzing with life. And I think it's such a revelation to sort of think, oh, there's loads of creatures in there that we can't see, and they're all really tiny, probably. And just to sort of know that it's got this biodiversity happening underwater without knowing what it is or what it looks like. Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. But then I guess also then you do, I started to realize that I do want to know, actually. I do want to know, like, to connect the
Yeah.
how things look and how things sound, because you either have one or another quite often. We were once last winter I was in Australia, and we were staying in a tent, and in the middle of nowhere, and there was this creature in the nighttime that was very close to our tent, and made this like horrible sound that I thought, this is it, like we all gonna be attacked. And then I was like kind of researching what kind of animals could have been around us. Like obviously we were not attacked, and the animal then disappeared. But and then it was a kangaroo. And then I
Really?
realized, like,
Wow.
like, do you know how the kangaroo sounds?
No.
So this is the point when I tell to the kids that I work with, if they get super, super loud, then I remind them the sound of the kangaroo. And it's let me try to to do it. It's like this.
Wow. You're really
Pretty
good. I
amazing,
think it
right?
sounds like you're really good at kangaroo impersonations, but I don't know what one sounds like, but it's a good sound.
It's a good sound. Imagine that in the nighttime. It's
Wow.
terrible.
Scary. Oh, you just reminded me of I did this residency in Bavaria a few years ago, and it was
Mm,
in this villa, and you kind of walk through the forest to go to the lake. And I was trying to, like, go for a swim every morning really early. Um And one morning every morning I used to go through this little bit, and there'd be this dog that would suddenly start barking in this house, and it would always make me leap out of my skin. So I'd always try and go really, really, really tiptoe past that. I don't want to wake the dog up, you know. Anyway, I was coming up to this point, and there was a bush on my left, and there was this really loud sound coming out of the bush, like a roaring sound, and the bush was shaking. And I was thinking, I can't believe it. Like, I'm not even got to the barking dog yet, and there's this like roaring, shaking bush. So I was like tiptoeing really close to sort of find out what was going on, and I had to go past it. And then I discovered what it was, and it was a snoring hedgehog. And it was just
Oh, beautiful.
like so loud. I couldn't believe it. It was this really sleepy, snoring hedgehog having a lovely rest, but it was making a huge sound.
That's fantastic. Did you attempt to record that? No, you didn't have a means to do it.
No, I was swimming. I was off for a swim. I didn't record it. I just have to remember it.
Snoring hedgehog. That's fantastic.
Did you record the kangaroo? No.
No. Actually, well, I did because I was
Oh,
I was freaking out and I was in a tent. So I did press the record button on my phone, but it's a very but then you can actually, if you search, you do find the sound sort of recordings of a kangaroo.
okay.
It's not, I mean, snoring hedgehog. I think this is
Actually, I haven't
this is
searched.
very exotic.
I haven't Googled snoring hedgehog. I have to do that.
So what was the residency in Bavaria? What's the name of it?
It was in a place called Villa Waldberta, and I think it was maybe about 10 or 11 years ago. So I think it belongs to the city of Munich, the villa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by Lake Starnberger. And they just house different artists in there for a few months at a time that are connected to some projects that are happening in the city.
Mm.
It's a really amazing place. Did you say your stone piece is in Munich?
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
That's why I was like, yeah, so I
ah,
spent quite a lot of
you,
time there.
you should investigate. Have you been to the lakes around there? Starnberger and Ammersee?
No, I haven't, and I'm really sad that I missed out on that because we were so focused on the work
Yeah.
and within the city that I never really managed to get out of it.
Oh,
And I realized afterwards, like, as we were talking with our team, how beautiful the surroundings are.
yeah.
And so, yeah, something to investigate. And also how close to Italy is that.
Yeah.
It's like all these mountains, like the beauty that we know, it's all there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really stunning area. Mm.
So is residency sort of something that you often do as part of your practice, like staying in different residencies and then delivering the work after that, or is this
Um,
less of a pattern?
I think it's less of a pattern. I do occasionally do that, yeah. I think it's just working out often if I go on a residency, if I want to try and build something or make something, it would need to be somewhere that has some facilities to do that. Or things like the Bavarian one was more like going away to making some new collaborations with local artists, and I don't know, it depends really. I did a really good residency earlier this year at a place in The Hague that's with this group called
Mhm.
Instrument Inventors Initiative. And that was because I applied for that because they have this whole practice of building instruments and interfaces, and I wanted to kind of get to know the people working there and use some of their facilities and
Mm.
yeah, or somewhere yeah, occasionally do residencies. I mean, the one in Bavaria was pretty amazing because of where it was, really, and just wanting to be somewhere where you're in a big forest by a lake. Yeah. Do you do residencies?
No, no, not so often actually. I find it quite, yeah, unless I was thinking what would be the ideal model of a residency for
Mm,
me. And I think moving somewhere like for a year or like for a really long time, maybe that would make it somehow efficient. Because I felt that like the short ones you do, unless you have like a very specific aim
mm,
to produce, which happened few times where you really kind of work on something specific. But if you do have to come up with something that's kind of more um, specific to the location, I find I get a bit scared of like just staying on the surface, as a
mm.
newcomer. And yeah. So yeah, I don't do residencies very often. I loved we did one in Schloss Solitude in 2016, which was like a significant residency for me because this is where we did or where we started to work on the opera Sun and Sea. and and I guess also residency is a good place where when you want to work with other people, so it allows to stay in one place for an extended period of time. Otherwise, it's very hard to get people together, I feel.
Yeah, I think that's one of the the things I've got most out of residencies have been when there's like a group of people together and they're kind of there to collaborate. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, it depends. Sometimes it's difficult to find a block of time long enough to make it a long enough residency to achieve something. And then sometimes, I mean, I just did a really short residency in Sweden, but it was with people that I'd worked with before. And so
mm,
we kind of got together and tried out some new ideas and then did some improvising together, um, which was kind of perfect because if we'd got together and it was just about the right amount of time for that.
yes, yeah.
So where was your sound and sea residency and tell me a bit about that.
That was in Stuttgart in Schloss Solitude. That's a really nice residency, actually. And solitude, they really mean that. You are kind of in Stuttgart, but you are just alone in the castle. Well, alone with another like 30 residents. So which builds a community on its own, actually. But yeah, but I think also the fact that there are quite a few other people, it allows also to test things out with them without things needing to be serious, or
Yeah.
you can really play, and that's really nice.
I
Yeah,
think sometimes it is just like sometimes it's a context, isn't it? So, if you're away with lots of other people and you've brought some of the things that you do and you're collaborating and you're playing, and there's not necessarily a pressure to kind of make a finished collaborative work, but to kind of explore ideas together. It's not
yeah,
necessarily something you might make time and space to do in your like everyday life. You know, if I don't know when I would I suppose I do that in Bristol sometimes, but to be somewhere with a group of people to kind of explore and play with ideas together can be like
yeah,
a really refreshing context to kind of come up with new ways of working or just sort of like get yourself out of your usual habits and do new things.
yeah. But do you find yourself like doing this less and less? I find, when I realize that at some points when you're kind of, I don't know, like few years back, when I look at myself, I I see myself doing much more like explorations and like
Yeah.
spending time with people without like particular aim.
Oh yeah.
And you know, and as you get busy and then you have to like follow the deadlines, you
Ah.
realize yourself being this like grumpy person of looking at the watch and thinking, if people are in this like free mindset, wanting to maybe be very slow in the processes. Do you find that? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I used to do that a lot more. Yeah, it's been a bit of a busy year. So, um, yeah, but like I said, I did do this residency in Sweden a few weeks ago where
Mm,
it did just carve that time out. Or like, even though I had loads of other stuff I needed to do, and I was thinking about a little bit in the background, I had come away for like 5 days, like not too long, to
mm.
do this, more playful kind of collaborations with other people. So yeah, it kind of made that happen, which was good because yeah, you're right. It's kind of it can get a bit full on when you get busy with lots of deadlines. Need to find time to go and swim in the river.
Yeah,
See?
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. I can't believe you're in Vente. Just thinking about it again with the sun behind you. It's
Well, it's like 7 kilometers to Vente, so
okay.
it's in the area, but not exactly there. But this is like this is the place. And it's the time of the year, like August, when the birds are actually planning to leave.
Yeah.
Um, a lot
Oh,
of them.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because I went in October to try and film the Baltic Flyway, and it's really cold. And
Oh God.
I took I had this.
But so,
I think my camera froze. I had this camera that was like a DV tape camera, and I sort of plunked. I got up really early, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I plunked it down on the peninsula, and then there was this flock of geese that started flying over. And I've been waiting for ages. And there they were. And I was like, the camera had frozen. It didn't work. So I didn't really get any footage. But it didn't really matter. It was just an
so
experience.
so that's interesting. So in October you could still follow some birds leaving, because I thought they all leave in August and
Oh,
they're
really?
all gone.
Um,
So I'm wrong, right?
well, actually, maybe the birds that are there actually in Vente leave, but I think there's ones that come from further east, but they use this Baltic flyway, and they all fly over the Curonian Spit because it helps them navigate that sand dune. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's like some some birds coming from like Siberia and Russia. They will come over the Baltic flyway, and they'll end up. I think
Oh,
they
okay,
end up
okay.
in East Anglia and in Scotland, and or maybe I got that wrong. Maybe not Scotland, but they come over towards England because the
Okay.
winter's less mild, it's milder. So they have to
Yes,
kind of
yes,
leave
yes.
freezing. But
Okay, so they're just passing by
yeah,
then
they're
in October.
passing by a lot of the kind of water birds and waders. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was basing it on, I'm not an expert in any of this. I was speculating, but there were definitely big flocks of swans and geese coming past.
Yeah. So when you work, do you try to become an expert in certain things, or are you kind of working more on the poetic level of
Oh, well,
things
I
matches?
wouldn't, yeah, probably a bit. I don't try and become an expert. I mean, I really like to chat to um, scientists who are experts in things like I've sought out this scientist recently who's like an expert in how bees use static electricity to communicate with flowers. And I really love those conversations where they're just like so involved in this amazing sort of
Mm.
like, research and knowledge of this sort of, I'm really particularly interested in, other species and sensing. So
Hmm.
I kind of love to have those conversations and find out loads of things. But I guess I'm again a bit of a magpie, kind of dipping in and out, and I find it really fascinating, but also it's all kind of feeding into how that might become a kind of poetic um interpretation, or it just feeds into ideas and things that I'm kind of working with and playing with. Um, so I wouldn't say I was an expert in any of those things, but also it's quite nice when I've had these conversations with scientists or
Mm.
also people who aren't necessarily or just like hobbyists or people that have got specific curious areas of knowledge. Um, when I've made work that's inspired by it, to then also retell some of the stories and ideas and research alongside that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just one of my yeah, again, trying to make situations where I get to like have an excuse to kind of knock on the door of someone and say, "Hi, I hear you're like really specialist in how bees use static, and I'm making a piece." Da, 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 da. And then you kind of have
Mm.
really amazing excuse to have these conversations and learn loads of interesting things and meet people with these like fascinations and sort of research um, approaches to things like that.